There are places where silence is not the absence of sound. It is the presence of something that should be dead, but is still breathing. The Ucayali River, in the impenetrable heart of the Peruvian Amazon, is one of those places. Since 1987, 32 people have entered those waters and never returned. No bodies were found, no traces. But every night, when the fog rises from the river's black surface, the voices come back. They are not echoes. Echoes repeat what has already been said. These voices speak new things. They call the names of people who are still alive. They describe the inside of houses no one should be able to see. And there is something worse. The voices are your own voice. 7 versions of the same person speaking at the same time, each one delayed by half a second. As if the river recorded you and is now playing you back on a warped loop. 32 disappearances in 16 years. That is 2 per year in this specific stretch of the Ucayali. The drowning rate in the Amazon region is 0.3 per year per 1,000 inhabitants. Contamana had 800 residents. The statistical probability of these disappearances, 1 in 470,000. That is not coincidence. That is a pattern. In March 2003, 6 biologists from the National University of San Marcos set out to prove there was a rational explanation. They brought state-of-the-art equipment, satellite radios, GPS. On the 7th day, communication stopped. When the rescue team arrived, the camp was intact. The cameras recorded until the very last second. And in the footage, there is something. A sound that makes ears bleed when played above a certain volume. And in the final frame, reflected in the water, there are faces. Faces looking up. Faces that do not have the correct shape of human faces. This is not a story about disappearances. It is about what remains when someone is removed in a way reality cannot process. Before we dive deep into this unsettling story, help the channel by hitting like, subscribing, and turning on notifications. What you're about to hear may make you question every body of water you encounter from now on. And tell me in the comments, what city are you watching from? Because wherever you are right now is still safe. For now. September 1987. Martin Quispe, a fisherman for over 20 years, left at dawn in his canoe. His wife watched him paddle toward the bend where the trees swallow the light. He waved. She waved back. 3 hours later, the canoe returned on its own, floating perfectly in the center of the current, without a scratch, without a single drop of water inside. The fishing rod was still secured to the side, the bait untouched, the straw hat folded on the bench exactly the way he always left it. Martin Quispe was never found. But 7 days later, his wife woke at 3 in the morning to his voice calling from outside. She recognized the tone, the cadence. It was his. But something was wrong with the rhythm, with the breathing between words. As if someone were imitating him without fully understanding how a human throat works. She did not open the door. She stayed frozen in the darkness, listening to the voice circle the house, striking the walls, scratching at the windows. When the sun rose, there were marks. Not handprints, marks of something that tried to have the shape of hands. 5 fingers but articulated incorrectly, too long, as if they had been stretched by something that understood anatomy, but not physics. In the months that followed, others vanished. A couple crossing the river on a ferry, 2 brothers swimming in broad daylight with witnesses, an elderly woman who went to fetch water and ceased to exist between the riverbank and the surface, a distance of 10 feet. All followed the same pattern. No struggle, no screams, no blood, as if they had been erased from reality. And the voices, always the voices, returning 7 days later, calling, describing, knowing secrets the dead should not be able to know. The government sent teams. Nothing was found. That was when they decided they needed science. That was when they called the biologist who would never return. The team arrived in Contamana on March 14, 2003. 6 biologists, all under 35 years old. All convinced that science could explain everything. The expedition leader was Dr. Elena Vargas, a specialist in river ecosystems, 17 published papers. She did not believe the stories. She called them folklore, superstition from people without formal education. But Elena had doubts she did not share with the team. 3 nights before leaving for Cantamana, she dreamed of dark water. Not an ordinary nightmare. She was submerged, but she could breathe. And around her, floating in the darkness, were faces, hundreds of them, all staring at her, all with their mouths open, all saying her name. When she woke up, her clothes were wet, not with sweat, with water, water that smelled like a river. She told no one. Scientists do not talk about premonitions, about dreams that leave you genuinely soaked. So she swallowed the fear and boarded the trip anyway. An old man named Vicente Huaman grabbed her arm as they disembarked. He said the river was not water, it was a wound, and some wounds do not heal, they only grow. Elena wrote it down in her field notebook under local beliefs and continued on to the camp. For the first 3 days, everything went according to plan. They collected samples, cataloged species, measured temperatures. At night, they laughed about the villagers' stories. Elena joked about how fear turns perception into paranoia. How an owl can sound like a human voice in the dark. On the 4th day, they found the anomaly. Rafael Cespedes was analyzing water samples at different depths. The composition made no sense. The surface showed normal oxygen levels, but at 16 feet down, oxygen vanished completely. It didn't decrease gradually. It stopped, as if there were an invisible line dividing 2 different realities. Elena ordered the measurements repeated. Every test confirmed the same impossible result. Rafael volunteered to dive. He had advanced certification, had explored caves in Mexico and deep reefs in the Caribbean. 16 feet was nothing. He entered the water at 3 in the afternoon, the sun still high. 4 people watched from the shore. 2 cameras recorded from different angles. Rafael descended slowly, his flashlight cutting through the growing darkness. When he reached the 16-foot mark, the light stopped. He stayed motionless for 10 seconds. Then he began to move erratically, zigzagging as if struggling against something. But there were no air bubbles. The surface remained calm, like dark glass. The light began to rise, far too fast. Rafael was ascending without decompression, without controlling his speed. Elena shouted for him to slow down. He did not respond over the communicator. The light rushed upward, faster and faster, and then stopped, less than 3 feet below the surface. Everyone could see the glow of the flashlight just beneath the water, the blurred silhouette of Rafael. But he did not emerge. Carlos Mendoza jumped in to pull him out. He swam to where the light hovered, dove down. His hands passed through the light, through it, as if Rafael were only a projected image. Carlos surfaced, gasping, screaming that he couldn't touch him, that his hands went through the body like fog. And then, the flashlight went out. Rafael disappeared. He did not sink. He did not float. He simply ceased to be there. They searched for 6 hours. Ropes, hooks, dives. Nothing. Rafael had been taken the same way as the other 32. No blood, no struggle, no explanation. That night, they canceled the expedition. They packed in silence. Elena reviewed the recordings compulsively, frame by frame. That was when she heard it. In the audio recording from the moment Rafael vanished, there was a sound. Low, almost imperceptible. A frequency that made the hair on her arms rise, and beneath that frequency, voices. Multiple voices layered together, speaking in unison. She increased the volume, isolated the frequencies, and then she understood. They were not different voices. It was the same voice, Rafael's voice, multiplied. 7 versions of it, all speaking at once, each delayed by half a second, like an echo. But echoes don't speak full sentences. Echoes don't say, "It's cold down here." "Why won't anyone come get me? I can see you. Why can't you see me?" Elena tore off the headphones. Her hands were shaking. She looked beyond the campfire, into the darkness, toward the black mass of the river. And there, at the riverbank, someone was standing. A wet silhouette, dripping, the same size as Raphael. But when the light reached the face, it was not a face. It was a smooth surface, without features, like wet clay waiting to be shaped. The mouth opened, and Raphael's voices came out all at once, each one half a second apart, saying he was cold, saying he needed to get into the tent, saying he didn't understand why no one had helped him. Elena could not scream. She only watched as the thing walked toward the camp, its legs moving mechanically, as if remembering how to walk rather than knowing. The others were asleep. They didn't hear. Elena should have woken them, but her body did not obey. She stayed frozen, watching the thing enter Carlos's tent. There was a muffled sound, not a scream. Something wet, like fabric tearing underwater. When she finally moved, it was too late. The tent was empty. Carlos was gone. In place of the sleeping bag, there was only a pool of dark water. And in the water, reflected impossibly, because there wasn't enough light, was Carlos's face looking up, his eyes open, his mouth moving without sound. And then multiple versions of his voice rose from the puddle. Elena, why are you looking at me like that? Elena, I'm right here. Elena, why won't you answer? That was the night the expedition died. When the sun rose, 2 more biologists were gone, not in their tents, their belongings untouched, boots still tied outside, as if they had evaporated from inside their sleeping bags. Elena and the 2 remaining biologists, Anna and Beatrice, didn't wait. They grabbed only the cameras and ran. Into the forest, away from the river, away from the water, away from the sound of multiple versions of their own voices calling their names. But you cannot run from something that has already recorded the sound of your breathing, the rhythm of your heart. Anna vanished when she stopped to drink from a stream. She was kneeling. In the next second, only her bottle remained, still rolling. Beatrice disappeared while they slept in shifts. Elena woke up, and she simply was not there anymore. The backpack remained, the flashlight still on in her hand, but Beatrice had been removed like a word erased from a sentence. Elena was the only one who made it back to Contamana. It took 11 days. She handed the cameras to the authorities. The government classified the files, declared it an accident. Elena never worked again, never went near water again, and every night, until her death in 2019, she slept with the lights on and the windows sealed, because she could still hear them. Multiple versions of her own voice calling from outside, the version the river had captured, calling her back to finish what she had started. Vicente Huaman was 92 years old when Father Tomas Ibarra arrived in Contamana in July 2003. Vicente had lost 3 sons to the river over the course of 30 years. The first in 1973, the second in 1989, the third in 1998. All adults, all experienced, all gone without a trace. And all of them returned as voices 7 days later. Those same versions of the same voice, calling Vicente by name, asking him to come down to the riverbank, saying they were cold, saying they wanted to come home. Vicente no longer believed they would return, but he stayed because someone had to remember. Someone had to keep the names alive. He kept a notebook where he recorded every disappearance, every time he heard the voices, every time he saw something move in the water that was not a fish, not a current, not a reflection. In April 2003, 1 month after the university expedition, Vicente noticed a pattern. The voices did not call randomly. There was a sequence. They always began with the name of the oldest person in the village. If that person did not respond, did not approach the water, the voices moved on to the next. Vicente was at the top of the list. His name was called every night, sometimes for hours. Those versions. Always those versions. But he never answered. Never looked directly at the water when he heard them. He kept his eyes on the trees, the stars, anywhere except the dark surface where the voices were born. Tomas Ibarra had not been sent by the diocese. No one had called him. He simply appeared, carrying an old backpack and a charred wooden cross. He settled into the abandoned chapel, a building with a partially collapsed roof that no one had used in 5 years. The last priest had left in 1998 after trying to exorcise the river. He had waded in up to his waist, raised the cross, and begun reciting prayers. The water around him boiled, not with heat, with movement. As if thousands of things were stirring just below the surface, the priest fled screaming, never returned. The cross was found 3 days later, nailed upside down to the chapel door. Tomas was 43 years old, and his hands trembled when he thought no one was watching. Vicente went to him because he needed to speak, needed to pass on the notebook before it was too late. He found Tomas kneeling before the altar, not praying, just staring at the burned crucifix. Vicente sat on a broken pew and waited. Tomas spoke without turning around. He said he could feel it, said the place had weight, pressure in the air, like being underwater without being wet. Vicente asked if he had come to exorcise the river. Tomas laughed, without humor. He said, "You don't exorcise something like that. Exorcism implies something entered from outside. What was in the river had always been there. It had simply woken up." Vicente placed the notebook on the bench. Said everything was in there, all the names, all the dates, said someone needed to know. Tomas picked it up, opened to the first page. Martin Quispe, September 1987, fisherman. Canoe returned empty. Voice heard 7 days later. Those versions, half-second delay. Tomas flipped through the pages. Dozens of names, hundreds of details. He closed the notebook, said he would take it, that he would try to get it to someone who could investigate. But he knew, and Vicente knew he knew, that it would not happen. That night, Tomas read the notebook from beginning to end. 4 hours. When he finished, his hands were shaking worse than ever. He had come to Contamana because he had heard rumors, places where reality felt thinner, where things leaked through cracks. Tomas had dealt with 3 such cases before. All of them had ended badly, but none on this scale, none with this persistence. He tried to pray. The words felt hollow, as if God were deaf in that place. Tomas blew out the candle, sat in the dark, and listened. After 20 minutes, he heard it. His name, whispered softly, not from outside, from inside, from the back of his skull. Those versions of his own voice, each one half a second apart, asking why he was so afraid of himself. Tomas did not sleep. He sat with his back against the wall, clutching the burned cross, watching the window. And in the squares of moonlight, he saw shadows. Not shadows cast by things blocking light, shadows that moved on their own, that had almost human shapes but bent the wrong way. Tomas closed his eyes. When he opened them, the shadows were closer, one beside the window, its head tilted at an impossible angle. He squeezed the cross. The wood was too cold. He whispered a prayer. The shadow tilted its head the other way. Its mouth opened, far too wide, and multiple versions of Tomas's voice came out, reciting the same prayer backward. Perfectly synchronized, half a second apart. Tomas stopped. The shadow stopped. Then it smiled. It had no features to smile with, but its shape changed in a way that could only be a smile. And then it was gone. 3 days later, a 19-year-old girl named Lucia arrived asking for help. Her brother Fernando had disappeared. He had gone fishing at dawn and never returned. Lucia had searched. No one helped her. They told her that when the river takes someone, that person is already gone. But Fernando was all she had. Their parents had died 3 years earlier from a strange illness. Blood from the ears, the mouth, the eyes. The water they had drunk had been contaminated with something biology had no name for. It was just her and Fernando, and she could not accept that he had simply ceased to exist. Tomas tried to explain, said he had read the records, that no one came back. Lucia looked at him with contempt and desperation, said he was a priest, that he was supposed to have faith, to believe in miracles. Tomas did not know how to answer. He had stopped believing in miracles during the third special case, when a 12-year-old girl was found impaled in a bell tower, 65 feet above the ground. No ladder, no blood. Just her body pierced by the bell, her eyes still open, her mouth repeating words in a language that had never existed. But he did not say any of that. He only promised he would try to help. Lucia nodded and left. Tomas watched her go, and he knew he had just lied, that there was nothing he could do, that Fernando was as lost as all the other names in the notebook. But he walked to the eastern bend of the river where Fernando had vanished. He arrived in the late afternoon. The place was too silent. No birds, no insects. Only water moving with the wrong consistency. Too thick. Tomas knelt at the bank, leaned over the water. His reflection looked back, but it was delayed. When he moved his head, the reflection followed half a second later. When he blinked, the reflection blinked out of sync. And the reflection was not blinking with both eyes, only the left one. The right remained open, fixed, staring at something Tomas was not looking at. Tomas recoiled. His reflection did not. It stayed leaning forward, kept staring. Then it smiled. Tomas did not smile, but the reflection did anyway. It opened its mouth, and those versions of Fernando's voice came out. Each one half a second apart, saying Lucia's name, saying he was cold, saying he could not find his way back, saying the water was full of doors, but all of them opened into deeper places, saying he could see light above, but could not swim up to it, because the water pushed downward no matter how hard he tried. Tomas ran. He did not look back, but he could hear it. Fernando's voices calling, then changing, calling him. Multiple versions of Tomas's own voice saying he knew more than he admitted. That he had come to Contamana because something had called him, because the burned cross had been burned in a place like this, a place where reality had cracked, and that Tomas was not here to help. He was running from something he had awakened in the last place he tried to seal, something that followed him, something that wanted to be added to the river's collection. Tomas did not stop until he reached the chapel. He locked the door, sat on the floor with the burned cross, breathing hard. The voice had stopped, but it would return, because the voice was right. He had not chosen to come. He had been brought, because whatever was in the river recognized what he had awakened in Santa Rosa, Argentina, and it wanted it. It wanted everything Tomas had touched, everything he had tried to seal, everything that followed him in the shadows. The notebook lay open where he had left it, a page he had not read carefully. About a previous priest, 1991. Father Augusto. He had come to exorcise the river, entered the water up to his chest, never came out. 3 weeks later, a fisherman found his cassock, intact, and in the pocket, a message in his handwriting. It is not exorcism it wants, it is company. Tomas looked at the window. The sun had set. The darkness beyond the glass was absolute, and in that darkness, there were shapes, dozens of them, all standing still, all watching, all waiting. Lucia did not wait for the priest's help. She recognized that look, the look of someone who had already given up before starting. She waited until midnight, took the strongest flashlight they had, a hunting knife that had belonged to her father, and a length of rope. She didn't know what the rope would be for, but every survival guide said never to go into the forest without rope. Even though, technically, she wasn't going into the forest. She was going to the river, which was worse. The riverbank was different at night. The air had weight. Every breath required conscious effort, as if the atmosphere itself had thickened. Lucia turned on the flashlight. The beam cut through the darkness, but it didn't reach as far as it should have, as if the darkness had its own density and consumed light before it could travel its full distance. She called Fernando's name. Her voice sounded wrong, too loud and too muffled at the same time, like shouting into a pillow. The river did not answer. It only continued its perpetual movement, dark water over dark water, reflecting no stars. Lucia walked along the bank, sweeping the surface with the light, searching for any sign, and she found it. Footprints in the mud, fresh, the size of Fernando's boots, leading from the grass to the water's edge. She knelt beside them, touched the impression with her fingers. The mud was cold, so cold it burned. She jerked her hand back. Her fingers were white where they had touched it, white like dead tissue. She rubbed her hands until circulation returned. Then she aimed the light where the footprints led. They didn't stop at the waterline. They continued, down the submerged bank, visible through the dark water like impressions in glass, going deeper and deeper, until they vanished into absolute darkness where even the flashlight couldn't reach. As if Fernando had simply walked downward, as if the water were stairs. Lucia should have left, should have gone home, locked the door, waited for morning. But she thought of Fernando, who was 9 years old when their parents died and had held her hand through the entire funeral, squeezing so hard it left marks. Fernando, who worked 14-hour days fishing so they could eat. Fernando, who always said they would leave Contamana someday, go to Lima, start a new life far from poverty, far from the river, far from the stories that kept everyone awake at night. She put one foot into the water. The temperature was shocking, not cold, not warm, absent, as if the water had no temperature at all, as if it were the absence of temperature. She took another step. The water reached her ankles. Another step, still her ankles. She was 10 feet from the bank now. But she had taken only 4 steps, and the water was still the same height. She looked down through the dark surface, and she saw it. The riverbed was not 20 feet down like it should have been. It was far deeper, and she was standing on something solid, something that looked like stone but moved very slightly beneath her feet, breathing, rising and falling in a slow rhythm, like ribs. Lucia froze. The flashlight shook in her hand. The beam danced across the water. And in that movement, she saw more. The riverbed was not mud. It was covered in something that looked like skin. Skin stretched over shapes that were almost human, but not quite. The outlines of arms, legs, torsos, heads. Hundreds of them. Thousands, maybe. All fused together into a single layer that covered the entire stretch of riverbed the light could reach. Then the eyes opened. Not 2. Hundreds. Scattered across that fused surface of skin, opening in perfect synchrony, all looking up, all focusing on Lucia. And from every one of those eyes, water flowed. Not tears, river water, as if the eyes were springs, as if everything beneath her was bleeding the river into the river. Lucia screamed, lost her balance, fell. She expected to hit water, expected to sink, but instead she landed on something solid, something that gave under her weight but did not let her through, like falling onto flesh. She was lying on the surface of the river, not floating, not swimming, lying on it, as if the water had solidified into a membrane. Through that membrane she could see, eyes just below, mouths opening in the fused mass of skin, mouths without teeth, just openings. And from each opening bubbles rose. They were not air bubbles, they were solidified sound. You could see the words inside them, see the names: Fernando, Martín, Rosa, Diego, Lucas, Elena, Rafael, Carlos. All the names from Vicente's notebook, each one repeated, multiple times, each repetition half a second apart. The bubbles burst when they reached the membrane where Lucia lay. And when they burst, the words entered her, not through her ears, through her skin, absorbed directly into her body. Lucia tried to get up, but her hands found no purchase. They sank into the membrane up to her wrists. She pulled back, The membrane stretched, stuck to her, like wet spiderweb, like melted, burned skin. She pulled harder. The membrane tore. Her hand broke through. And immediately something grabbed her from the other side. Fingers, too many, far too many for one hand, wrapping around her wrist, pulling, trying to drag her through the tear. Lucia pulled back, used her other hand to grip the knife. She cut. The blade went through the fingers. They separated, but they did not bleed. They dissolved into dark water and were absorbed back into the membrane. More fingers grew to replace them, twice as many now, all grabbing, all pulling. She cut again. And again. For every finger she severed, two grew back. And now she could see beyond the tear. Faces pressed against the underside of the membrane. Faces she recognized. Her father, her mother, Fernando. They were not ghosts. They were physical, solid, real, but wrong. The faces were not attached to bodies. They were attached to the fused mass of skin, emerging from it like reliefs, three-dimensional but with no depth beyond the surface. Like living masks glued to flesh that did not belong to them. Their mouths moved, called to her. Fernando's voices said her name, said it was cold, said it was dark, said they needed her to come down. Just a little deeper, just through the membrane, just to join them. Lucia screamed again, gripped the knife with both hands, cut the membrane in a straight line, made an opening large enough to pull her arm free. She rolled. The membrane clung to her like glue. She rolled again, got to her knees, then to her feet, and ran. Running on that surface was like running on flesh. Every step sank. Every movement required triple the effort. And behind her, the tear she had made was growing, opening wider, like an infected wound spreading. And from the lips of that wound, things were coming out. Not the people, the shapes of people. Silhouettes made of dark water, vaguely human in outline but transparent, hollow, with only solid eyes, eyes glowing with light that came from nowhere. They crawled across the membrane, fast, too fast. Lucia ran harder, her legs burned, her lungs screamed. The flashlight had fallen behind her, still on, casting a circle of light on the membrane, and in that circle, she saw their shadows. The silhouettes, 6 of them, 8, 12, multiplying, all crawling toward her, all with mouths open in silent screams, all emitting multiple versions of the same sound, each half a second apart. The bank was close, 16 feet, 13, 10. Lucia jumped, left the membrane, flew the last few feet, hit the grass, rolled, ended up on her back, gasping, staring at the sky. For a moment, everything was silent, just her breathing, just the stars. Then she heard it, the sound of water being displaced. She turned her head. The river was rising, not gradually like a flood. The entire river was lifting, the whole surface pulling upward like a sheet being yanked off a bed. Dark water rising in a solid mass. A wall of liquid 10 feet high. Lifting out of the channel, moving toward the land. And along the sides of that wall of water there were faces. The faces of every person who had disappeared, pressed against the inner surface, like people trapped behind glass, all looking at her, all with mouths open, all screaming without sound. Multiple versions of every scream, half a second apart. Lucia got up, ran toward Contamana, screamed for people to wake up, screamed that the river was coming, that it was leaving its bed, that it was hunting, and behind her, the wall of water kept moving, slow, inevitable, like a glacier made of liquid, coming to take what was left, coming to complete the collection. Lights flickered on, doors flew open. Faces looked out and saw the terror in Lucia's eyes. They saw the water still dripping from her clothes. They saw the marks on her skin where fingers had grabbed her. Black marks, necrotic, as if something had burned through flesh down to the bone. And they believed her. Vicente was the first to step outside. He looked toward the horizon where the river ran. He saw what was coming, the wall of water, moving slowly but inexorably. Like a glacier made of liquid, advancing over the land. Vicente did not run. He only watched for a long moment. Then he turned and went back into his house. He took the notebook, walked to the chapel, knocked on the door. Tomas opened it. His eyes were red from lack of sleep. He saw Vicente. He saw the notebook. He saw the expression on the old man's face. And he understood. Vicente handed him the notebook, said Tomas had to leave, had to take the record far away, had to make sure someone knew. Because the river was no longer waiting. It was coming to take what remained, to complete its collection, to erase Contamana from existence, and every name still breathing within it. Tomas took the notebook, asked about Vicente. The old man smiled. It was a sad smile, but also a relieved one. He said his time had come, that he was tired of running, tired of hearing the voices of his own voice every night, tired of living in a world where his sons existed only as echoes in dark water. He was going to the riverbank. He was going to answer when his voice called. He was finally going to see what was on the other side of that membrane, and maybe, if something like reunion existed in that impossible place, he would see his sons again, even if they were no longer his sons, even if they were only impressions, only memories solidified in flesh that was not theirs. Tomas did not try to stop him. There were no words for that. He only placed a hand on Vicente's shoulder, squeezed. Vicente nodded. Then he turned and walked toward the wall of water that was still advancing. He walked slowly, with dignity, with the posture of someone who had finally made a decision no one else could make for him. Lucia watched Vicente go. She wanted to scream for him to come back, but she knew it would not matter. She looked at Tomas. The priest stood in the doorway of the chapel, holding the notebook, watching the old man walk toward his death, or toward something worse than death. Lucia asked what they should do. Tomas looked at her, then at the wall of water, now less than 600 feet away and still moving. Then at the remaining inhabitants of Contamana, who were beginning to leave their houses, seeing for the first time what they had tried to ignore for so long, finally coming to claim them. Tomas said they had to leave, all of them, immediately, not toward the river, not by water, through the forest, cut through the jungle. It was a different kind of suicide, but at least in the forest there was a chance. In the river there was none. The river did not forgive, did not hesitate, did not forget. If they stayed, they would be taken, all of them, and they would become part of that fused mass of skin on the bottom. Another face pressed against membranes, more voices calling endlessly to those who had not yet been taken. The people began to move, grabbing what they could carry, leaving everything else behind. 183 people, all running now, all entering the forest, all fleeing from something that should not have been able to leave the river, but was leaving anyway, because rules no longer applied, because this place had decided to stop following the laws that made reality function. Vicente reached the wall of water. He stood before it. The wall stopped, as if waiting, as if recognizing him. Vicente raised his hands, touched the surface. It was cold, solid, but not rigid, like touching gelatin. He pushed, his hand passed through, sank into the wall up to the wrist, and then hands inside the water grabbed his. Small hands, his son's hands, all 6 of them, pulling him gently, not with force, with invitation, like children asking their father to play. Vicente closed his eyes and stepped forward. He let the wall of water swallow him. He disappeared into the dark mass. For a moment his outline was visible through the surface. Then it began to dissolve, to fuse, to become part of that impossible texture. And the wall continued its march, over the place where Vicente had stood, over the houses of Contamana, over the empty streets, covering everything, erasing everything, leaving only water where there had once been life. But along the edges of that wall, where the water touched buildings before swallowing them, There were impressions, marks in wood, scratches in metal. And if you looked closely, you would see that the scratches formed letters. Formed words, formed names, all the names from Vicente's notebook, and more, many more. Names of people who had disappeared before 1987, before there were records. Names of entire tribes that once lived along the banks of the Ucayali and then simply ceased to exist. As if the water had taken them all at once, as if the river had grown hungry enough to swallow entire settlements. The names kept appearing, carved into every surface the water touched, as if the river were leaving a receipt, as if it were cataloging, keeping inventory of what it had taken. And although no one remained to see it, when the wall of water finally receded hours later, Contamana was empty. Not destroyed, empty. Buildings intact, streets clean, but without people, without animals, without insects, without anything that had been alive before the water rose. Only silence. And the marks in the wood, the names, hundreds of them now, including, carved into the chapel door in perfect letters, Vicente Huaman. The survivors were questioned, separated, interrogated one by one. Their stories did not align perfectly. Trauma never aligns perfectly, but there were consistencies. Everyone mentioned the water. Everyone mentioned the voices. Multiple versions. Always multiple versions, half a second apart. Everyone mentioned faces pressed against surfaces that should not have been able to hold faces. The authorities did not know what to do with that. So they did what authorities always do when confronted with the impossible. They filed it away, declared the case an evacuation due to water contamination, permanently closed Contamana, restricted access to the area, and moved on. But Tomas did not move on. He had Vicente's notebook. He had the names. He had the record. He tried to publish it, tried to warn people, tried to make someone pay attention. No one did. Newspapers said it was fiction, exploitation of tragedy. Universities said there was no scientific evidence, that water does not have consciousness, that rivers do not hunt. The church said it was not their concern, that there was no spiritual component, only collective psychosis induced by isolation. Tomas stopped trying to convince institutions, but he kept writing, because Contamana was not the end. 6 months later, another settlement along the Ucayali was found empty. 14 months later, another. Always the same pattern. No violence. No bodies. Only names carved into wood. Only watermarks where water should never have reached. The river was growing, not physically. Its hunger was growing. Its hunting ground was expanding, mile by mile, swallowing riverside communities, collecting people. Lucia survived. But the marks on her skin where the water had touched never healed. They remained black, dead, cold, always cold. Even on the hottest days, those patches of skin stayed frozen to the touch. And sometimes, when she was alone, when the night was quiet, she could hear him. Fernando, calling, not from far away, from inside the marks, as if pieces of him were trapped there, as if fragments had been left behind when the water erupted, stored in the dead tissue of her skin. She tried to remove the marks, tried to cut the dead skin away, but no matter how deep she cut, there was always more. The necrosis went deeper than skin, deeper than muscle. It touched bone. As if those drops of water had infected something fundamental in her structure, something that could not be removed without removing her entirely. Eventually, she stopped trying. She learned to live with the voices, with the permanent cold, with the constant sensation of being watched through the marks, as if they were windows, as if Fernando could see through them, as if the river could see through them, keeping a record of her, waiting for the day she became weak enough, tired enough, lonely enough. Tomas died in 2009, a heart attack. But before he died, he updated the notebook one last time, added more names, more settlements, more disappearances. The total now exceeded 2,000. 2,000 names cataloged over 22 years. And those were only the recorded ones. How many more before 1987? How many more in places where no one kept records? How many names did the river know that no living person still remembered? The notebook passed to Lucia. She keeps it to this day, updates it when she hears news. When villages along the Ucayali are abandoned, when families relocate without leaving traces, when fishermen vanish and their boats return empty. She knows that eventually she will be added to the notebook, that the marks on her skin will spread, that Fernando's voices will grow louder until she can no longer tell what is inside her head and what is outside. That one night, she will wake up and walk to the nearest river. Walk in and join the collection, but not yet, not today. Today, she writes, she keeps the record, adds the names, because someone has to remember. Someone has to keep count of how many were taken, how many more will be taken, because the river does not stop. It never has. It only waits. It only calls. And eventually, everyone who hears the call answers. The notebook has 347 pages now. Lucia bought a second one. She knows she will need a third, a fourth, a fifth. Because the river does not end. It only adds. It only grows. And as long as people live along its banks, as long as someone remembers the names of the missing, the river will keep calling. It will keep replicating voices, multiple versions of each one, offering impossible reunions in places where reunion should not exist. Some people, the lonely ones, the desperate ones, the ones who have lost more than they can bear, will accept. They will walk in. They will add their names to the notebook. And the river will continue growing. Because that is what it does. That is what it has always done. Since before it had a name. Since before humans arrived and called it the Ucayali. It collects, it stores, it preserves, in forms that are not life, but not death either. A middle state reality has no word for. And it will continue. Forever. The Ucayali River still flows through the Peruvian Amazon. You can find it on maps, read about it in travel guides. You can even visit it, if you are brave enough or careless enough. The authorities deny everything, say the settlements were evacuated for sanitary reasons, that people migrated, that the disappearances are normal statistics for a dangerous region. But the locals know. They keep their distance. Do not fish in certain stretches. Do not drink water that runs too dark. Do not answer when they hear multiple versions of their own voices calling at night. And when strangers arrive asking questions about missing relatives, they only shake their heads. Tell them to leave, not to come back, to forget the names they are looking for. Because the names belong to the river now, and the river does not share what it collects. If you are watching this video, if you made it this far, leave a like, subscribe, turn on notifications. Not for views, but because the more people know, the harder it is to hide. And tell me one last time in the comments, what city are you watching from? Because I want to know how many of us still remember, how many still believe that some disappearances are not accidents. The Ucayali does not return bodies, it only keeps, it only replicates, it only calls. And somewhere at the bottom, deeper than light can reach, there are faces, thousands of them, pressed against membranes, all looking up, all waiting, all speaking names, multiple versions of each one. Half a second apart. Names of people who are still breathing. Names of people who will eventually answer. And when you answer, when you respond to multiple versions of your own voice, you understand. It was never an invitation. It was a claim. You always belonged to the river. From the first time you looked at it, you were already marked, already cataloged, already on the list. This was the mystery of the river that does not give back, but it is not really a mystery. Mystery implies an answer. This has none, only continuation, only growth, only a hunger that never sleeps. Thank you for watching. Thank you for remembering. And please, Never answer when you hear multiple versions of your own voice calling, no matter how familiar they sound, no matter what they promise, because it is not you. It never was. It is only the echo the river made of your absence, and that echo wants you to complete it, because in the river, everyone eventually is, until the next mystery. If there is a next one, if we are still here to tell it,